On the 4th of January 1989, two Grumman F-14 Tomcats of the United States Navy shot down two Libyan-operated MiG-23s, which the American F-14s believed were attempting to engage them, as had happened 8 years prior during the 1981 Gulf of Sidra incident. The engagement took place over the Mediterranean Sea, about 40 miles north of Tobruk, Libya. In 1973, Libya claimed much of the Gulf of Sidra as its territorial waters, and subsequently declared a line of death, and warned that any American ships or aircraft that crossed it would be met with the full force of the Libyan military. Fighters from American aircraft carriers would routinely fly inside the line of death, as part of the American Navy's Freedom of Navigation operations, designed to prove a commitment to the conventions of international law, which stated that the Gulf of Sidra was in fact a gulf, and therefore the only territorial waters that Libya could claim were those that extended 12 miles off the coast of Libya. On the morning of the 4th of January 1989, the USS John F. Kennedy was sailing towards the eastern Mediterranean Sea for a scheduled port visit to Haifa, Israel. The aircraft carrier was more than 120 miles north of Libya and had aircraft operating roughly 80 miles north of the country. Aircraft from the Kennedy included several flights of A-6 intruders on exercises south of Crete, two pairs of F-14 Tomcats from VF-14 and VF-32 conducting combat air patrols, and an E-2 Hawkeye providing airborne early warning and control. The easternmost combat air patrol station was provided by two F-14s from VF-32, with aircraft call signs Gypsy 207 and Gypsy 202. Although the Kennedy Battle Group was not operating within the contentious Gulf of Sidra and was actually 600 miles away from Rapta, the Battle Group commander believed Libyan concerns about a U.S. attack increased the likelihood of confrontation. The American air crews were given a special brief by the Battle Group commander, which emphasized their rules of engagement due to the carrier's proximity to Libya. At 11:55 local time, the E-2 Hawkeye detected two Libyan MiG-23 floggers taking off near Tobruk and observed them heading north towards the battle group. The F-14s from VF-32 were promptly vectored to intercept, while the F-14s from VF-14 covered the A-6s as they departed to the north. The intercepting F-14s began tracking the MiG-23s when the Libyan aircraft were 72 nautical miles away, at an altitude of 8,000 feet and traveling at a speed of 420 knots. Unlike some previous aerial encounters where Libyan pilots were instructed to turn back after detecting an F-14's radar signal sweep their aircraft, the MiG-23s continued to close in on American fighters with a head-on approach. The rules of engagement of that time were more lenient than previous years, stating that a Libyan aircraft did not have to fire at an American aircraft to be declared hostile, but simply if it had turned towards an American aircraft that had attempted to turn away at least 3 times.
Gypsy 207, contact 175, 72 miles. Looks like a flight of 2, Angels 10.
In the beginning segment of the clip, we can hear the F-14, call sign Gypsy 207, has contact with a flight of 2 bearing 175 degrees for 72 miles at 10,000 feet.
Bogies appear to be heading directly at us. I'm coming port. Steady up 150 for 30-degree offset, 50 miles.
The F-14s have established a 33-degree offset from the Bandits with a range of about 50 miles to the Bandits.
Bogies have jinked back into us now. Let's come starboard 30 degrees the other side.
Initially, the F-14s had pulled port side to establish a 33-degree offset. The Libyan floggers have now turned into them, putting them back on their nose. The F-14 now is turning the other direction for a 30-degree offset on the other side, trying to get the MiGs off his nose.
Bogies have jinked back into me now for the 3rd time with noses on at 35 miles.
The MiGs have once again turned into the F-14s, putting them off their nose. This is the 3rd time the F-14 has tried to turn away and the MiGs have turned into them. By the rules of engagement, the MiGs can now be declared hostile at this time and can be engaged.
Okay, I'm taking another offset, starboard 210.
In an attempt to not open fire, the F-14 continues to attempt an offset once again in the other direction, hoping the MiGs will turn away.
Bogies jinked back into me for the 4th time. I'm coming back starboard.
Serious attempts are being made by the F-14 to give the MiGs every opportunity to turn away and avoid the engagement, but they continue to turn into the F-14s. The nose-on behavior the MiGs continue to display can be dangerous, due to the fact that it will eventually lead to a weapon solution for the MiGs.
Bogies have jinked back at me again for the 5th time. They're on my nose now. Inside of 20 miles. Master arm on. See, good light.
The MiGs have once again turned nose on. At this point, the Rio decides to get ready to engage. Inside of 20 miles, he orders master arm on. Pilot responds with good light, indicating missiles are ready to be fired.
Bogey is jinked back into me again. 16 miles, center of the dot. Say your angels. I'm at Angels 5, nose up. Oh, his angels.
Oh, wait a minute.
Angels are at 9.
This segment is important because we can tell the F-14s have positioned themselves about 4,000 feet below the MiGs. We will see why later.
Alpha Bravo from 207.
The pilot of the F-14 transmits Alpha Bravo from 207, an attempt to speak to the Admiral on the carrier to get a ruling on the engagement, but gets no response.
13 miles. Fox 1.
Oh, Jesus.
At this range, the F-14s have to fire. Waiting any longer will put them within weapons range of the MiGs. An AIM-7 Sparrow is fired.
Good hit on one.
Roger that. Good kill.
I've got the other one. Select Fox 2. I got Fox 2.
Coming hard, stop.
So fucking shoot him. I don't got a tone.
Got the second one.
I got the second one on the nose right now.
Hey, I'm high cover on you.
Lock him up. Lock him up. Bam! Shoot him, Fox 2. I can't. I don't have a fucking tone. Select. Good kill.
Hey, good kill. Pilot ejected. Pilot ejected out of the second one.
In this final segment, we hear the confirmed kill of the first MiG from an AIM-7 Sparrow and a delay to get tone to fire on the second MiG, but eventually an AIM-9 Sidewinder is fired and hits the second MiG. The pilot of the second MiG ejects. The first pilot hit by the AIM-7 Sparrow is killed. Since the incident in 1989, intense review of the electronic data recorded during the encounter has yielded details about the maneuvers and conversations of the American and Libyan pilots and their controllers and superiors on the ground and at sea. This data has led to questions regarding the legitimacy of the shootdown. One of the major remaining questions yet to be answered is what mission were the two Libyan MiG-23 fighters carrying out on January 4th when they approached the aircraft carrier USS John F. Kennedy and its combat air patrol of two F-14 fighters. The United States had its eavesdropping nets spread out during the shootdown, and Egypt also monitored the incident, but neither intelligence network answered the key question of what the Libyan pilots were told before they took off to meet the two F-14s flying south towards Libya. Both the United States intelligence community and the Egyptian Defense Ministry remain mystified about the MiG's mission. The Libyans could have been conducting an innocent reconnaissance mission, as Tripoli claimed, or setting the Libyan pilots up to be shot down to rally Arab opinion behind the Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. The Pentagon said at the time that the Libyan pilots kept maneuvering to get in firing position while the Navy pilots tried to avoid the MiGs before shooting them down in self-defense. The Pentagon released new details stating that the Libyan pilots never turned on their radar needed to guide the long-distance Apex missiles onto the oncoming F-14s. The mere threat of the Apex missiles justified the radar intercept officer to open fire from a distance of 12 miles with his Sparrow missile. Some officials have suggested the Libyans' maneuvering was too slight to be considered hostile. Others suggest that the fact that the Libyans, with a history of shooting first, accelerated as they neared the F-14s by kicking on their plane's afterburners, justified the Navy action of shooting first. Navy aviators interviewed about the shootdown reinforced the assertion that the administration had inaccurately portrayed standard intercept maneuvers as avoidance and had overstated Libyan maneuvering before the shooting started. They said that after plotting the Pentagon's description of the turns made by the F-14s and MiG-23s and listening to the tape of the F-14 cockpit conversation, they concluded that the Navy pilots in the incident were striving for the standard offset position to one side or the other of the oncoming aircraft. Other naval aviators stated that the F-14s followed standard intercept procedures on January 4th, right up until the Rio of the lead aircraft took the unusual step of firing the first Sparrow radar-guided missile without first consulting with his pilot or a higher authority. In describing the shootdown during a briefing at the time, Pentagon spokesman Dan Howard stressed that the F-14s made 5 avoidance maneuvers. The Navy jets were probably protecting the aircraft carrier, which was steaming 127 miles off the Libyan coast. An unnamed Pentagon official said regarding the rules of engagement for military pilots, quote, "If the pilots had been Russian and done the same thing as the Libyans, they wouldn't have been shot down," end quote. He said US and Soviet fighter pilots have frequently engaged in mock aerial combat after spotting one another and have built up a trust that does not exist between US and Libyan counterparts. During interviews, several Navy officials said they were told the Libyans, quote, "never knew we were there," end quote, until the first Sparrow was launched from 12 miles away. This leads credence to the theory that the MiG-23s were not in the area to engage the F-14s, but were merely on a reconnaissance mission. However, this remains highly controversial. According to those who have read the transcripts from the US eavesdrop net that day in that area, confirmed that the Libyan ground controller sent the MiG-23s toward the F-14s, and late in the intercept track said, quote, "look to the right," end quote. It is not known whether the Libyan pilots did so or what they saw, if anything. Another portion of the communication intercept suggests that the Libyan pilot talking saw the F-14s, but the distance between the F-14s and the MiGs at that moment was so great that it casts doubt on whether he actually did. The intercepts also indicate that at least one of the MiG-23 pilots knew he was painted by an F-14 radar and may have been homing in on it, but the evidence is not conclusive that the pilot saw the F-14s with its eyes before the shooting started. Pentagon spokesman Hoffman said that the Libyan pilots knew where the Americans were, but Navy aviators familiar with the limitations of the one-seater MiG-23 theorized that the Libyans may have indeed been looking and searching for the F-14s, but were also surprised by the Navy fighter. This theory holds a little more water. As heard in the tapes, the F-14s had positioned themselves below the MiGs, forcing the Libyans to try to find them in the radar clutter generated by the ocean, or rely on their distant ground controller. One pilot stated, quote, "the MiG-23 radar is virtually blind looking down like that, and the pilots would have gotten only a few paints or radar detections from the ground controller," end quote. Because surveillance radar does not provide the constant and precise updates of an enemy plane's location, as does a fire control radar, which the Libyans had not turned on. Naval aviators questioned about the incident said the Soviet-built MiG-23, quote, "is a pig. It's virtually blind, especially looking down. All it can do is go fast," end quote. Pilots said the MiG-23 with afterburner operating can accelerate to 950 miles per hour at low altitude, compared to about 650 miles per hour for the F-14 Tomcat. "If the MiG is coming towards the carrier," said one pilot, "you have to worry about him blowing past you. If he blows past you, you can't catch him, and then you have to worry about him firing an air-to-surface missile at the carrier. But otherwise, the MiG-23 is a pig." The obligation of Navy pilots tasked with fleet defense is to protect their carrier from hostile action and aircraft. This directive increases the likelihood that they will take preemptive action in uncertain situations like the January encounter. During a debate at the United Nations after the shootdown, Arab representatives accused the United States of an unjustified attack on a harmless reconnaissance flight. Then US Ambassador to the United Nations, Vernon Walters, compared the episode to walking down a dark alley at night and you see a man who has a gun, and you cross the street and he crosses the street. You speed up and he speeds up. You slow down, he slows down. I think you have to realize that he's not coming to present you with a bouquet of flowers, he said. The ambassador of Finland called for new rules to prevent such aerial clashes in the future. According to the explanations, the recent incident occurred between 2 aircraft on one side, described as being on routine patrol, and 2 aircraft on the other side described as carrying out routine operations. There must be something wrong with the routines if this is the result. There seems to be a need for an international code of conduct concerning both naval forces and aircraft in order to make it possible to build confidence, to avoid the possibility of misunderstandings about the intentions of others, and to reduce the risk of serious incidents. Rules regarding the behaviors of patrolling aircraft and reconnaissance flights can be internationalized and formalized in such a manner that activities would not be perceived as provocative and threatening.